Kevin, the BMW DIY guy here, doing a great project today. I'm going to be installing the Bimmertech CarPlay MMI device into an F30. What this allows you to do is seamlessly integrate Apple CarPlay into your system or your car that doesn't have this functionality already. So a little bit older models, this is a great way to add that functionality. Now again, make sure to click subscribe if you'd like to see all my current updates and things upcoming and any new videos that are coming out, so click subscribe. And let's talk about this project. This is a really simple project. All you have to do is take your center trim off, pull your head unit out. You don't have to take it out all the way and the 12,000 cables on the back of it. All you have to do is just put in a new cable, run a new cable up to your display, and you're pretty much good to go. So why don't we get out to the garage, let's get started and show you how this is done. Okay, so first things first, we got to take the trim off. I've already documented this in a bunch of my videos, but I want to show again. So just grab really gently at the top and gently pull outwards. Make sure not to pull too hard at the far end, because the last thing you want to do is pull really hard and snap your trim off at the other end. So I'm going to duck underneath here, get my fingers underneath and pop that free. So now that's loose. Now you're going to have a couple of cables here on the back. If your hazard and lock switch is loose, you can push it forward, which is what we're going to do when we plug this back in. So take that plug out and then reach in and get your lock and hazard switch plug out. And these are really stiff at times. So the other thing you can do, depending on your switch, sometimes you can take the switch and push it forward, which is, we're going to take the switch out when we put it back in, because it's easier to feed this cable through, plug the switch in and push it back into place. But so the first thing you got to do is take that out. So there you go. So now your trim is off and you're going to see you have several bolts you need to take. So first of all, this trim underneath, you can just pry with your fingers or a plastic trim tool. It will pry down and away. You can just simply set it off to the side. You can also unplug it if you'd like. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. These are T20 Torx to take out. You'll also, because we have to move the display, there's 2 T20s right here. So I'm going to take all 4 of these out. I'm going to take those 2 out. I'm going to pull the display up and I'm going to show you the differences once we pull this off. But this trim will come off and then you'll see the bolts that are holding your head unit in place. You can slide it forward. The other thing you're going to want to do is lay down some towels or something over your trim. Don't bang up your trim, especially when you're pulling the head unit out. It's surprisingly heavy. So I'm going to pull these 4 and then these 2 up here, and I'll show you what's next. So your trim piece, when you take it off, has a single plug on the back right here. So I've unplugged it to get it out of the way entirely. So that's this plug right here. There are 2 T20 Torx right here. I've pulled both of those. I've pulled the other 4 holding the trim on and the 2 holding the display on. Now the display is loose and you should be able to just grab it and pick it up. And as you can see, it separates up and away. Now in this case, because we're gonna have to swap cables around, I'm gonna pull the display all the way up and then push the locking tab on this cable and slowly work it out. Now, these tend to be really stiff, so be careful when you do it. You can also set your display aside for right now, because you're going to run this cable all the way down. Now, so the last thing, or the next thing you want to do in this step, is pull the head unit out. Now, this is really heavy. I forgot to grab some towels, so I'm going to grab a couple of towels and lay them out, because with all the cables that come onto the back of your head unit, it only comes out so far before you run out of space and you got to kind of set it sideways here. And the last thing you want to do is scratch up all of your trim. So I'm going to grab a couple of towels, lay them out, and then I'm going to back the head unit all the way out, because basically what we need to do with this MMI unit is set it back in behind. We're going to pull this cable down, route it into the box, route the new cable up. I'll show you how it's done. Let me grab some towels and we'll keep moving forward. So the head unit's out, it's a slid forward. There's actually a fair amount of cable length in this particular car, which is nice. So you want to take this video cable and feed it back down, because this is what's going to plug in into the MMI unit right here. So as you can see, you've got the multimedia interface unit here. You're going to take the cable that used to go from your display and plug it into the LVDS in of the MMI. Then you've got your new display cable here, which you're going to route in the same path as you did with the other, route it all the way up, and it's going to plug into the LVDS out. So, and then you can actually put your top display back in, because this is just going to run up. It's going to be running off the display. And then we will get this all back into place. Now, the one other decision that you need to make when you do this is where you're going to put your USB cable. So if you look at the Bimmertech functionality display video, they've got their iPhone sitting here on a vent clip. So they have easy access to their phone, all the like. Maybe you'll want to do the same. So it's really going to be a really personal choice on where you want this cable to run. Most folks are going to want to have access to their phone while they're driving as well, even with the CarPlay up and running. So in this case, I'm going to run this cabling down, and I'm going to run it out the driver's side kind of knee bolster. I'm going to have it come out right there underneath the trim. So it's a matter of feeding it back behind. Now I'm going to tip the camera to show a little bit on how I'm going to do it. But it's just going to be a matter of using a plastic trim tool, getting this knee piece, gapped out a little bit, and able to feed this up and around, this end up into this void space back behind, where it'll plug into the USB right here on the MMI device. So all pretty straightforward. So the two things I'm going to do, so I'm going to run this cable. Like I said, this will just run down and out nice and easily down through this section. So I'm going to run that down and get it into where it needs to be. I'm going to get the display back installed, because I'm going to get the cable plugged back into the display and get it set down into place. And then I'm going to run the USB cable, which shouldn't be too hard. It's just a matter of, like I said, of gapping this piece by your right knee for the driver, finding the space, and there is some space way back here and behind, and you can see it. Now, the other trick you can always do is if you shine a flashlight, of all things. So in the space you're trying to go from, if you shine a flashlight and then you stick your head back here and look, you'll see where the light is, and it helps you feed cabling through real narrow spaces like that. So I'm going to do that next, and then I'll show you what I've done. So the USB cable's in. As you can see the end of it right here. So all I did was I used my plastic trim tool. I put it in to get a little bit of gap between the knee pad or that knee plate on the driver's side, fed it up with my hand up on the inside, and just fed the plug straight into my hand. It was like, and then pulled it through. So really simple to do. So now we've got our display cable. So why don't we go ahead and put our primary display back on. So you just take that, you can see, just plug it straight back in right there, just like that. So it's in and good. There's some posts that this fit down in onto, and just pull the extra cabling down, because you don't want to have any extra gap up there. There you go. So it's fed into place. And then when you get an opportunity, you can put the two T20s back in. So that portion of it is done. We'll get these cables out of the way for a sec. So now we've got the video end here. We've got the cable out of the head unit here, plugged into the LVDS in here. We've got our new out right here, and we just simply plug that right into place right there, just like that. So pretty straightforward as far as that cabling is concerned. Now, the other thing you need to do, and cables are long enough, I'm going to set it out of the way for a second. Now, the other thing you're going to need to do is you need to get this big wiring harness into place, and this is how it jumps in between the two signals. So you've got a big, huge horse collar plug like this on the back of your head unit. All you have to do is just on the bottom edge, so the orientation of your unit would be the bottom edge. There's a horse collar like this. And as you can see it, you pry it and pull it back, and then that will release that primary plug. They tend to be pretty stiff. Be careful pulling them out. Also, you never know what, may or may not have been done, with the car prior to you. Maybe it's completely OEM. Maybe there's been a little bit of modification. You never know. So just be careful as you do it. So now, as you can see, that plug is out. Now, if your car has a green and black cable right here. Now, this car does not, but you'll see green and black cable that comes up right here. This is the optical cable. You'll need to take that out and put it into the exact same position right here on the new plug that's going to go back on the back of your head unit. Now this car doesn't have it, so we don't need to transfer it, but if you do see that, make sure to transfer that cabling or you're going to have audio issues in your car. You're going to get this all done and you're going to wonder why you're having sound problems. Okay, so now make sure that your cabling is all clean, because when you don't want to tangle all your cables, right, when you do this, because when you tuck this away, it's really going to be a matter of getting it pushed back in all this space, and if your cables are a tangle, it's going to be a problem. Okay, so now take the new female, so the male that you've taken off the back of your head unit, the new female, plug it straight into place, and just rock that horse collar down. So now that's all locked in and good to go. You'll take the other male end right here and plug this into the back of your head unit, just like that. Getting around all the other cables, which is a little bit of a challenge. Slide it into place, make sure it's pushed in firmly, lock that horse collar down. Okay, so now that's all plugged in and that cable's done. So here you are looking at the power and everything else that comes off of for the MMI box. And again, cable management's going to matter in all of this, so I'm trying really carefully to make sure to keep all of my cables from getting tangled. It's going to make it easier on you and me when I tuck the head unit back in, because again, you're putting this box into space that wasn't designed for it. They really only gave it as much space as they felt they needed, so as you put extra things in, that cramps space, right? Okay, so you've got your primary power plug. Just take that guy, plug it straight in, make sure that you've got a good strong connection. Now with all of your connections, and especially these video connections, make sure that they're in and solid, because as I've worked with the video displays, I found no signal errors or things like that come from one of these being loose, and it can be as loose as little as 1/16 of an inch. So make sure that they're in and in really firmly. Okay, so power's in, video's in, and here's our USB, which will plug in right there, like that. Okay, so now, as you can see, everything's plugged in, and actually it's got power because its LED box is blinking as well. So the next steps are going to be tucking this back into place. So I've got all of this cabling in this big box I've got to tuck down. It's going to be almost impossible to show, but the MMI box you want to put down, and if you can, excuse me, to the right, because that seems to be where there's the most void space to get it down into, because that's really going to be the challenge, right? Because your head unit is going to turn around and go right back into this space. So you need to get all this cabling in, you need to get that MMI box in. So it's a matter of tucking everything back as far as you can as you get all this to feed in. Okay, so just work at it, work at it, work at it, work at it to get it into place. Now all the cables are tucked back. We've got the head unit here, and I'd be surprised if I made it at first pass. I usually don't. Yeah, see, I've gone ahead and so I don't have the space laid out very well because it's hitting something, right? It's probably hitting the cable bundle, but this is that next step that you need to do. So pull your head unit back, see if you have the same challenge, pull your head unit out, tuck all your cables down, tuck them down and away, and tuck them down and away as much as you can, then work the head unit back in until it gets over the mounting posts, and you can put in the two T20s. So that's what I'm going to work on. I get it worked back into place. I'll show you. We're going to put our trim back on, but really we're almost done. Okay, so as you can see, the head unit's in. All I did was just slide it back into place, and I was able to get the wiring harness, those big plugs for the wiring harness, tucked down and left. I was able to get the MMI unit tucked down and deep right, and then just worked the head unit back into place. I've got the two T20 Torx installed here, and as you can see with the guideposts, that it's all the way in, which is good. So I've plugged the trim back in. There's that single cable right here. Be careful with that cable. I found that sometimes it is unbelievably tight in the plug, but you've got that. Now, if you've got the LCI trim, or you retrofitted the this LCI trim, which is lighted like I did, then make sure you've got all your extra cables plugged in. You've got your cable plugged in for the trim. You've got your cable plugged in for your lower light here down into your cup holder, and just simply tuck those cables back into place. And then you put 1, 2, 3, 4, you put those trim, you put the T20 Torx for the trim back in. This lower trim, you just hook on the bottom and snap upwards into place. And then I've also put the two T20s for the display back in here as well. And then we've got the two plugs for the center trim. And I'm going to take the window and hazard button and work it out of the dash. because this, for whatever reason, this cable is really hard to plug in, or I find out I have a hard time doing it with it in place. And it's easier for me to just push that plug from the back, push it forward, take it out, and then feed this cable through the center of the trim, put the trim back into place, plug in the button, and put the button back into place. So it probably sounds a lot more complicated than it really is. Pretty straightforward though. So I'm going to put these in, I'm going to plug my buttons back in, put my center trim back on, and we're pretty much done. Okay, so everything is all back in, like I said, really straightforward. That plug for the switch really is kind of a pain. It's got some big ridges on it. So if you look at that plug, if you want to leave the cable, and when you plug that cable into the plug, when you look at it, there's some ridges on one side of the plug. Those ridges go on the steering wheel or driver's side when you plug it into this switch, okay? Or just push the switch out, plug it in when it's easier, and push it back into place. This trim goes right back into place by just pushing it in on that right side, like I said, where it's thin. Be really careful when you set that into place so you don't bang it up or beat it up at all. And then we're up and running. So Bimmertech has a fantastic video walking through, showing you the functions of how this works. And you can tell that the unit is already up and running, considering that it shows that there's an aux connection right here, because that's how it's feeding in as well. So I've run the USB cable, like I said, out through the knee plate on the driver's side, so that's good to go. A lot of people will have like a vent clip or something and will mount their phone up here and then plug your cable into it. But all in all, as you can see, this is really an easy, simple, quick install and really not that hard. So I think the hardest part is actually getting the head unit back into place, trying to feed past and feed with all of those cables. But all in all, we're done. So just make sure you button everything up, put all your tools away, and you're good to go. Okay, as you can see, that install isn't hard at all, and really doesn't take all that long. I mean, end to end, probably took me 15-20 minutes total. It takes a little bit longer, you know, doing the video, that sort of thing, but really not bad at all, as you can see. And all the connections are really straightforward. You know, the really choice you have to make is like where you're going to run the USB cable, and other than that, it's pretty straightforward. Yeah, it takes very, very simple tools. It takes a T20 Torx. It takes a plastic trim tool if you need it to get into the side of that kick plate or that knee plate on the driver's side, like I did where I ran the USB cable. All really simple, really, really easy. The one other thing I really also want to stress is activating the device. So in this case, in this car, you press and hold 8 and it'll bring the CarPlay UI up. Bimmertech has a functionality video up online you can check as well. You can see how it works, which is cool. But to activate the device, because I got it all plugged in and everything's good to go, plugged in one of the new iPhone XL Maxes, and you have to press and hold 8, and also to configure Siri as well once it recognizes CarPlay's up and going. At that point, works great. The overlay comes up on the screen, looks absolutely beautiful. So for those of you that are iPhone fans and want CarPlay functionality into your car, this is a really quick, simple way of doing so. Now, the other thing you can also do with this device is that if you do not have the OEM backup camera, this has the integration and integrated ports to install a backup camera. So when you go out to Bimmertech and you order this, you can see an option to add a backup camera. I didn't in this case and in this particular car, but this is something you can absolutely add. Either when you do this install, and it'll add, you know, the extra work of running the backup camera like I have on a couple of my other videos, or something you can do later if you want to break the work apart. Either way, it's great. Thank you to Bimmertech for a fantastic product and a really quick and easy install, and what really is going to add some great functionality to this F30. They're a great company, they're fantastic, and I definitely recommend them for all of your different needs as far as speakers, multimedia, you name it. They make great stuff. If you like what you've seen, please click subscribe, as I mentioned before. That way you get automatic updates for any of my new videos that are coming out. And thank you so much for everybody's support. It really means the world to me and my channel, and I'll look forward to seeing you on my next video.